Welcome to the Birth Boot Camp podcast, your trusted guide on your journey through pregnancy, birth, and beyond. I'm Holly, your host, along with Cheryl, Megan, and Liana that make up the Birth Boot Camp headquarters team. Together, we are here to explore the amazing world of childbirth and family wellness. Each week, we'll dive into empowering conversations with expert guests and share practical insights and heartfelt stories to support you on your unique path to parenthood. Whether you're expecting your first baby, you're a seasoned doula or childbirth educator, or simply curious about the miracle of birth, you're in the right place. Together, we'll celebrate the beauty of birth, honor the strength of motherhood, and embrace the joy of new beginnings. So sit back, relax, and join us on the Birth Boot Camp podcast, where every birth is amazing, every family is supported, and every story matters.
Hello, and welcome to the Birth Boot Camp podcast. I am Cheryl Ameling, the certification coordinator.
And I am Liana Wolf, the administrator.
And we are going to talk about birth plans today, kind of like what they are, what they aren't, what to include, how to get started, all of that. So we hope that this is a really helpful topic for you guys today. So let's just dive in. So Liana, did you have birth plans for your baby? So you had 3 of your own, 2 surrogates. What did that look like for you?
So we had the birth plan. We took the big birth class. We had the birth plan at the time. So this was, 12, almost 13 years, actually, no, 13 years ago. Yikes.
Mm-hmm.
That when we told our OB that we were going to have a birth plan, he said, well, make sure you bring it into your next appointment so that I can sign off on it. And I didn't really, know any different. I didn't know that that was, one of those kind of red flags that we talk about, that
Mm-hmm.
our birth wishes have to be, quote unquote, approved by our provider. But we did, and took it in, and the only thing, I remember this very clearly, he circled the portion about me wanting to be able to eat during labor. And he was like, well, we'll see how it goes.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, sure, I don't think it's going to be a problem. And I mean, spoiler alert, it wasn't. And we had a great experience and it was fantastic. But the whole idea of getting your plan approved is a little ridiculous. My second and third were at home, and we had kind of a birth plan with our midwife, but it was more of this is what we're going to do in case we need to transfer plan.
Okay.
And that was it. For the most part, our birth plan was, let's have a baby.
Yeah.
Let's have a baby with a midwife. That's what it was. When we got to our surrogate babies, that was a little bit different, because there was the plan for me for labor, and then they had a completely separate baby plan for them. And I just kind of went through what the hospital had. They had a template birth wishes form to fill out. And for me at that time, I was a childbirth educator and a birth doula, and I had 3 vaginal deliveries. I was like, this is fine. Like, I did not feel the need to write a detailed plan.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. So going back to your first one, how did it feel when he circled that? Like what I'm envisioning in my head is like a teacher with like her glasses down on her nose, and she has her red pen and she's like circling it like that. That's how that felt to me. How did it feel? How did that feel to you?
I mean, again, 13 years ago. So I'm trying to put myself back in that spot where I'm sitting in the exam room, and thankfully I was like in my clothing, because clothing, makes you feel a little more secure, less vulnerable. Right. And I honestly don't remember clearly exactly.
Okay.
I think a part of me was just a little bit defiant internally. Like, okay, we'll see how that happens. Like, we'll see if your little, signature or his initials or whatever he put there when he circled it, we'll see if that actually pans out, because I do what I want. that had nothing really to do with my knowledge of birth, because there were plenty of things lacking in the birth class that we took that I didn't know about until later. It was more my natural personality of bucking the system.
Okay. It's fair. All right. I like that. I had a student once who she kept saying that her doctor wouldn't sign off on her birth plan.
Oh.
And thinking about it, like, it took me, I sat with it for a long time. And the two things that I realized was, first, like, yeah, why is that signature quote unquote required?
Mm-hmm.
And two, if she took him a birth plan that he wouldn't sign off on, whatever that means, he obviously didn't provide the type of birth that she wanted. And she should have gone elsewhere. And she did eventually with her third baby. But I just think that it's so interesting that, like, that we think of birth plans as like this, like this contract or something that, like, needs to be signed off on or checked marked or approved or something like that. And it's that's not what it is. So we'll get into that in a second. So I had all home births, and we had birth plans, but they were more like your home birth plans. It was sort of like, this is what we do in an emergency. It also had things like who was going to be attending my birth, what their roles were, what I wanted to eat after the baby was born. Kind of like, it was just, my playlist, comfort measures that I liked, affirmations that I wanted said to me. So it was more like, it was like a how to tenderly care for me during my birth kind of thing. And I think it was still really important. On a birth plan, you don't have to put the things that are standard of care, so I didn't have to put that I wanted delayed cord clamping. What I did want was to make sure that I was, that I labored in the tub or just whatever. So it was more like a how to tenderly care for Cheryl during her labor, which I really appreciated that my midwife still encouraged us to do that, even though it wasn't, like a standard birth plan like you would look for in a hospital. So that was kind of my experiences with that.
I love that. I love that. How to care for me when I am in labor and after I have a baby. I love that. I honestly think that it would be a great idea to include that in when we talk about birth plans, as not just these are the things that we want or don't want to happen, but that vocabulary, that phrase of this is how I want to be tended to. I think that's really awesome. I love that.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I had never really put words to it that way until right this second. I really like it too. Okay. Well, let's talk about what a birth plan is. So, we can kind of just jump into so I always phrase the birth plan as like, it's like a communication tool. It's like, we take all the information, all the conversations, all the things that we've talked about in class, we've talked about with each other, we've talked about with our birth team, that's just sort of like, I feel like it can just be kind of floating out there in the universe. And so a birth plan is just a time to, like, gather it all from the clouds and put it all on paper.
Yeah.
How do you kind of talk about it?
I talk about it as like a wish list.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, this is the list of things that you want to happen as long as mom and baby are safe and healthy. Because every hospital, and nearly all of my clients are hospital, and nearly all of my students are hospital. And so I talk a lot about, the hospital. There may be people who really roll their eyes at the idea of a birth plan. And so we try to phrase it as, these are your birth wishes, and this is what you really want to happen ideally. Because I've been in the labor and delivery room when nurses will continue to say, well, as long as baby's fine, as long as you and baby and fine, or like, as long as everybody's fine. It's like, yes, we know that.
Of course.
Like, I wish that they would stop. Like, we understand that emergency care procedures are necessary and that they may come into play. But if not, let's follow this plan, these wishes. But the phrase birth plan, I don't know that that's going anywhere anytime soon. because it's easy to say.
Right.
So yeah, I always couch it as just like, this is what you absolutely want to happen if everything's going perfectly.
Yeah. I love that. I heard birth plans talked about like as a flow sheet one time. So, it's like if this happens, then this, and if this happens, then this. But yeah, like the idea is, of course, if we need medical care, if we need an intervention, of course we do it. Sure, yeah. But ideally, and you can't. I mean, that's why it's not a contract, right? Because you can't. Nobody can guarantee what your birth is going to look like. Birth can be unpredictable. And so, so we understand we can go off plan, but we can still have our wishes, our desires, the way that we want it to go, the way that we dream of it going. And it's okay to put all of that on paper and say, this is kind of what I'm wanting.
Yeah. And sometimes you may get off track in one spot and then you're able to get right back on the track. And just because one thing zigs when you wanted it to zag doesn't mean your entire birth plan is off the table. And that's why we talk about doing an additional birth plan for a C-section. Like, put all of your wishes in the event that you do have to have surgery, because there are still things that you can advocate for yourself in the OR.
Yeah.
It is very rare that you're in this kind of emergency situation where the goal is just get baby out now and save everybody's lives. That is a really rare occasion. Nearly always you have opportunity to say, no, can I have music during the surgery? Can I, like, once you've verified that baby's okay, can I do skin to skin in the OR? A lot more hospitals are allowing that. But it's not common. And so it's like, no, if you want that, you definitely need to write it down and advocate for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I also love what you said about like when you zig and when you wanted to zag. Yeah. And I always think too about like when we plan a vacation, like if you're planning like a beautiful holiday to Europe, and so like you're going to put all of this time and energy planning out each day, each detail, how you're going to get there, how much it's going to cost, where you're going to have lunch. Like you're going to put in that time, and it may or may not go exactly how you planned it. It may rain on the day that you plan the outdoor excursion, and so you got to zag when you wanted to zig. And so like in life we adjust. And so it's the same idea in birth. Like we can it's good to put all this energy into it and this time into it to really decide what's important to us and what we want. And if we need to like deviate, then that's okay. Like you said, I love what you said about like we can get back on track. Like a lot of times we can get back on track. But it's still so important to just to sit with it and think like, this is a really big day. It's a really, really big day that I never get to have again. It doesn't matter how many babies I have. I never get to have that day with that baby ever again. And so to put that time and energy into just thinking about it, what you want and how you dream of it going, I think it's really magical.
Yeah. While you were talking, a phrase came to mind of something that I grew up with because I grew up in a military family, and then used myself because of my own history at a military school. And that is adapt, improvise, and overcome. And sometimes you have to adapt your plan. Sometimes you have to improvise, and you just have to overcome whatever this hurdle is and move on with the process. And while there is usually time for us to process in the moment, sometimes there isn't, because labor can be a freight train.
Yeah. Sometimes
you just have to push through the process and deal with all of your emotions afterward. And I mean, that's a whole other podcast right there.
That's true. That's so true. Yeah. I really love that. I think that's so true. I just think it's interesting how we think about those things in life, but somehow we've like separated birth from like real life and how we would typically plan or adapt or whatever, overcome or whatever. And it's really not. Like, so much of birth is life. It's giving life, and it's part of our lives and something that we do. And so yeah, I think it's just really important to sit and dream.
Yeah. And I think that's something that we've lost within our culture in America. And that is because we don't have that village of women. We're not raised going to, like, watching our mother give birth, watching our aunts give birth, and participating in that. And so it has become something that you go to the hospital for that needs to be fixed. And pregnancy is not something that needs to be fixed. So I think a whole bunch of that still lies in that attitude of, you go to the hospital to have a baby, you go to a hospital to get the baby out.
Wow. I never really thought about that in that way.
Yeah. Like, most people, and I mean, I could be putting words into millions of women's mouths
right. We're
now,
doing a big.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the idea of, for those of us who have planned home births before, we already have a completely different vision of what that looks like. And we already see it as an experience and a journey. And I think that the vast majority of women, especially in the US, still just kind of think of it as something we have to get through, to get done, to get our baby.
Yeah. So thinking of it as, like, we go there to get our baby out, like the end result, rather than the journey, the experience of getting our baby out. Like, those are two very different things. Right. And yeah, like you said, like, we did just a really big overarching, like, but I think, like, as a culture, that's probably pretty spot on.
Yeah.
Which I think then goes back to the work that we do and the importance of it, because it's there's so much that this is a whole nother podcast that we take as women, we take from our birth experience. Who we are as a woman really can, like, our birth can play into how we feel as women. And again, not always, not, but
right.
But I think that there are a very large number of women who feel that way or would agree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even then I start thinking about, that's the role as doulas, is we're there to be part of the journey. And when you get to the hospital, your labor and delivery nurse and your OB or whoever your provider is, they're there to help you get the baby out.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, this is all coming into my brain right now during this podcast. And I'm
same.
I'm going to have to go back and write this down for when I talk about doulas in my birth class. Like, this is the role. They're there to be with you through the journey. The goal as a doula is not to help you get the baby out.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. So when we think about when we think about the building your birth team, and the job of a midwife and a nurse and a doctor is to help you get the baby out safely.
Yeah.
The role of a doula, your partner, anybody else that's going to be involved in the process of the journey. So, I mean, and really, okay, so I'm going to try to tie this back to birth plans.
Okay, the birth plans.
Is that these are all things that should be in, when we think about, like, all the conversations that we've had and how everything, they're just, in my head, they're like these little pieces of paper just, like, floating in the universe, that one says doula, one says midwife, one says delayed cord clamping, one says music playlist, and so, like, I'm gathering them from the clouds. And so, like, these are the things that need to be talked about and need to be on there. And as you're thinking about, what do I want this experience to look like? What are my birth wishes? And to have the people that help you get the baby out, the people that help you along the journey, that loving, tender care that you want during that process, how you want the baby cared for, like all of these are part of all of the, putting that on paper. And this is this is what I'm dreaming of. This is what I want.
Yeah. Beautifully done.
Yeah.
Tied it all with a little bow.
Yeah. Man.
So we're like, we've put the dream together, right? We've put the dream together in the plan. Now, how do we write it so that they'll read it? Because we can't write out like a journal entry. We can't write out the way we would want it to look, like this fantasy, right? We want to read it so that the people that are there to keep us healthy and safe, so that they will not only read it, but understand it. Understanding that they may have two other people in labor at the same time.
Right.
How do we do that, Cheryl?
Well, I love what you said about how it's not a journal entry, because all of a sudden I had like a vision of like a Jane Austen novel, and like everything's like beautifully worded, and but yeah, that's not what we're looking for. Do that. Keep that for yourself. Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful process. But yeah, like how do we get them to look at it to know what it is? So what we talk about in classes are in our classes, the kind of like the 3 categories: birth, labor, and postpartum, and then kind of a yes, please, no, thank you category. And where we say, this is what we want. This is what we're trying to avoid. And it's I think one thing that's interesting about birth plans is I've seen lots online. I'm sure everybody has. And I've seen some that I agreed with, like on paper, I agreed with everything that they said, that I would have wanted the same thing, but it's the way that it's worded. It's so, don't do this, don't do that. I only want this, I only want that. And you read it, you're kind of like, you get defensive just the way that it's worded. And so, kind of a more like, everybody likes to be talked to kindly and positively and professional, as a professional. So, kind of like, this is what we're hoping, this is what we're wanting, these are the things we're avoiding. I think is a good way to kind of start. What do you see with your clients? What works with your clients?
Well, really quick, I think that's so great. You were saying that you saw the one that was like, don't do this, don't do this. That gets back to that whole idea of, well, we can only do that if everybody's safe. And I feel like when you are so stuck in with what you want and so vehemently adamant, like, you can have your desires and wishes and they're wonderful. And there's a time and a place to stick to your guns for sure. But when you walk in the door with that attitude, you're going to get some pushback a little bit, because like you said, nobody likes to be spoken to like that. So yeah, I completely forgot your question that you asked me at the end, because I just wanted to talk about that.
Oh, I'm glad. I think that was great. I love the things that you added, because I think you're absolutely right. Like, things to stick to your guns to. But in general, like you're going to have, with anybody ever in your entire life, you're going to have a better result if there's a kind back and forth conversation. And, if you go in defensive, unfortunately, just the way human nature works is they're probably going to be defensive right back. And so now we've instantly created an atmosphere that is not great for labor. Let's be honest.
Well, and when you come in, if you feel like you have to be that defensive, did you really look into what provider you hired? Mm-hmm. And yes, that comes from a place of privilege. There are areas in our country where people can't choose a better provider, and I totally get that. But in many, many places, you have options. And if you are sticking with a provider who you feel like you have to have that attitude with out the gate, you may not be setting yourself up for the best experience in the first place.
Yeah. But then you can also think like, like honey is better than vinegar. So, so even in a place that is, maybe not the most friendly to what you're wanting, if you go in defensive, you're going to get, in a place that you already feel defensive in, So, but I think that's a really good point. So my question that I can't believe I actually remember was, what have you seen work for birth plans for your clients?
Honestly, the one that we talk about in Birth Boot Camp, I really encourage them to do the yes/no format and the way I explain to them is that nurses are busy, and even the most attentive, wonderful, warm, caring nurses, which they are out there and they are wonderful.
Yeah.
They're busy and they want to give you the experience that you want, that you desire, but they don't have time to sit there and read your birth plan and maybe read it 2 or 3 times because they have 2 or 3 other people in labor and they're trying to keep their patients, kind of on track for what they each want. And I recognize that as a doula, when I have multiple clients due in the same month or 2, and some are in my classes and some are not. And wait, you were the one who wanted this, right? And there's a lot of moving parts when you have multiple people's desires. And so when you have that simple format, and I've had a lot of clients, they actually ended up putting it, you'll love this, they put it on a spreadsheet.
Oh,
they put it in a document, a
dreamy
a spreadsheet where it was just like their yeses and nos, and they had it divided out by, this is what we want during labor, this is what we don't want, and it was just beautiful. And every single provider that I've met who has looked at that birth plan, who has expressed anything about it when I'm there, has said, your birth plan is really concise and easy to read. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm just like mental fist pump, because that's what we want. We want it to be easy to read, easy to scan, and concise. You don't even need to write full sentences, which hurts me a little bit as a grammar specialist.
Right.
But like, easy to read means keep it short, keep it simple, embrace the fragmented sentences.
Right.
Just put it down.
Yeah. Because they can't sit and read a novel.
Yep.
And for those who want to honor birth plans, which we, hope that every person is in a place that, encourages and honors birth plans. But like you said, like, they want to make sure that they have the birth plan with the client. And so if they can just glance at it and take 10 seconds, be like, oh yeah, I remember. Yeah. Then it's going to be easier than trying to figure out what you meant or read the paragraph or whatever. So I love that. I think that's
some of my favorite providers and nurses. They have looked at the birth plan and they'll scan and they'll say, a lot of this is standard. And so I'm not really going to mark anything down on that, but anything big that deviates, they put it on the whiteboard, which in hospital rooms, they have that big whiteboard that has all of your basic information. And your support people and who your nurse is and your room number and all these things. And so when I have a couple who goes in and dad wants to catch baby, they write that in big bold letters on that whiteboard, because that deviates from the standard. And so many of the things here in Denver have become standard. Optimal cord clamping has become a lot more standard here for most providers. Episiotomies are not a thing here unless they're medically necessary. And so even though they put those down on their birth plan, providers kind of skim over it because they're like, yeah, I haven't done an episiotomy in 13 years.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. Yay.
Yeah. Exactly.
But that's what I love. And I hope that other providers do that in different areas as well, where they put those big things on the board so that they can just glance at the board and say, oh, hey, we're here to catch a baby. Dad, you want to catch? Here, get in here. Make it happen.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, I love where this went. Like,
this was good.
This was so good. It's always fun to talk to, like, the back and forth and the conversation and the dreaming and it just gives me like all the feels. I love it. Okay. Well, do you have any like last thoughts or resources that you send people to or anything as they're thinking about their birth plans?
Not really resources. I did want to mention, I know at the beginning we out the gates having your provider approve your birth plan was like, ew. However, in that realm of having respect for your provider, because hello, they did go to medical school and
Right.
they do have this knowledge, and hopefully you have a relationship where this is a welcome back and forth and it's not an approval process. But taking your birth plan to your provider is really great for the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's not asking for approval. It's not asking permission to do these things, but it is, hey, is there anything on here that you as a provider don't do as your standard of care? Or is this new to you? Because I'd like to talk about it, because I took a class and I learned this and I would really like to experience that. And that open dialogue can be really great for that mutual respectful exchange of ideas for how you want your experience to go.
Bravo. Standing ovation.
And cut.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that you circled back to that because it's a conversation tool. And ideally they look at it and they're like, wow, this looks great. Let's do it. And, and yeah, and there might be some tweaking. There might be some like, well, the logistics of that look like this, or, that's not exactly that, and yeah, like it's conversation, which is so, so important. I love it. Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to say, take a class so that you know what your options are. When you're dreaming about what you want your birth to look like, there's so many things that you don't know. And so in class, we talk about so many things and questions to ask your provider so that this can be a conversation tool. If you don't know what the conversation is, you can't have the conversation, right?
Right.
And then second is there's a book, I can never remember her last name. It's A Natural Hospital Birth by Cynthia.
I don't remember.
Oh.
We'll put it in the notes.
Yeah. And it's so great. And there's a whole section on birth plans, and the way that she talks about it, it really changed the way that I talk about birth plans. Like she talks about how to get what you want in a hospital setting, and kind of the way to have those conversations and the ways to bring in those conversations into your birth plan, and to really like dream and then how to bring those down into something that's doable and reasonable and that's good for your birthplace. So highly recommend that book. I love it. It's so great. I wish I could always remember her last name, but there's like a block there. It's never going to be there. So, okay. Anything else?
Not off the top of my head. I think we covered a lot.
We did. And it was so good. It was so good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode. We will see you next time. And yeah, go make a birth plan, you guys. You're great.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Birth Boot Camp podcast. We're so grateful to have you as a part of our community. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it valuable, we'd love to hear from you. Please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more families on their journey through pregnancy and birth. As a token of our appreciation, we're excited to offer you our exclusive birth plan blueprint. Inside, you'll find expert guidance and a template to help you create a birth plan that reflects your preferences and desires for your birthing experience. Simply click the link below in the episode description to have your blueprint sent right to your inbox. Remember, your birth plan is a powerful tool for communication and advocacy during labor and delivery. Don't miss this opportunity to take control of your birthing experience and advocate for the birth you envision. Thank you again for listening. Be sure to subscribe, and we look forward to sharing more amazing insights and stories with you in our next episode.